I want to see Mr. O. Well, Mr. O's in now, so he'll be up here about 5 o'clock. And tomorrow we're going to hear from people like Romy. Who wants to hear from Romy Vadera? Well, give him a hand. Romy just walked in. Welcome, Romy. So I'll tell you, I said it earlier, and I just want to say it again, how fortunate that I am, and I hope you all feel the same sentiment, how fortunate are you as well to be in a position to listen to such talent on a really groundbreaking opportunity. And we haven't touched even 1/10 of 1% of the human species around the world with this product. And I'm just so excited and so grateful to be here. With that said, are we ready? Are you ready? Are we ready back here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. I want to welcome back our international viewers. Welcome to the Orlando 2013 afternoon event on this Saturday. We want to welcome you from Singapore, from Asia, from California to Maine, and all around, all parts in between. We're really grateful that you're joining us here. And any replays after this event, after tomorrow evening, you'll be able to watch those replays on the internet for the next 7 days. So again, thank you from all over the world for joining us. At this point, I'd like to introduce our first speaker that's going to get the afternoon started off. He's a speaker that we all know and love. He's a speaker that's written a book called Confessions of a Skeptical Physician. Let me ask you a quick question. How many people have used that book from 6A Tools and made very successful sales with it? I can't hear you. How many made successful sales? How many want this gentleman to come up on stage right now and tell you more? I can't hear you. We need to really give him a round of applause. Come on, everybody. Dr. Timothy Mcknight.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, everybody.
Ian,
Glad
that's
to
where it
made
is.
back from lunch, and hope nobody falls
that.
asleep.
And
I feel really hungry. Great group of people, and I think one of the things I like the most is just interacting and talking with you at various locations through the conference. And so it's a great honor. Actually, I'm nervous to come on stage. Oops. Going in and out, guys. Okay. Oh. Is that better? You want me to speak at the podium? And stay right here? Or?
Yeah, we're tweaking something.
Okay. All right. So tell me when I can. Yeah, I'll give you a thumbs up. Okay. So I'm not nervous, but I have to tell you, I spent a lot of time working on this talk up until about 2 hours ago because I feel I owe you my best. And thank you. I'm also especially honored today to have met several allopathic physicians. I mentioned a couple years ago in an event like this that I thought someday that there was a growing tide of allopathic physicians who would find their way to the Enagic family and come here with an open mind. And we have a number of allopathic physicians here, more than I think I've ever seen at one of these conferences. So this is absolutely wonderful. One in particular, I was very surprised when I stepped in a room and I saw his profile and I thought, I can't believe he's here. And I walked up a couple times to take a second look, and it was only until I saw his cowboy boots that I realized who he was. This man is a pioneer in age management medicine. I'm not going to embarrass him by mentioning his name, but the fact that we have somebody of his caliber here doing the things that he does with his patients is a real tribute to those of you who have approached him and his wife and made them come here to learn more. So great job for those of you who are working with physicians like me and him. I'm going to, many of you know my story. I started out in nutrition and was working on a doctorate in nutrition. And after 8 years on the PhD track, I went to medical school, graduated from Ohio State University, did a family practice residency, And finally, at the age of 40, I had my first job. And as I went into practice, I was very frustrated with what I was doing to really just manage the diseases that I was seeing. And as a result of this, I developed, sort of on the side, a wellness program that was about educating people on healthy lifestyles with nutrition, exercise, stress management, and whatnot. After a couple years doing this on my own, a grant was submitted to Health and Human Services, and we were awarded a 3-year grant, which now has been renewed 2 more additional times. And we've received over $1 million in funding to take this wellness message to the community. And it was in one of these classes that I was introduced to ionized water and was very skeptical. In fact, my contact person was almost obnoxious with how pushy she was. But I came thinking this would keep her quiet and she wouldn't talk to me about it anymore. When I saw the demonstrations like you saw last night here with Bob Gradelli, that really intrigued me because I knew there was no magic there. And then I started hearing stories about people who were getting healthier and feeling better. And then I started doing research, and I got very confused with what I found on the internet. But I did find studies, mostly in the Far East, that support the benefits of ionized water in tissue cultures, in animal models, and in some human studies. So as a result of all that background and having opportunities to speak in these events, 6-8 Tools and I teamed up, and together we published a book called Confessions of a Skeptical Physician. So a lot of the information about the studies and the science is in the book, and I've given that talk a number of times. I didn't want to necessarily repeat that. So I'm going to change the focus a little bit today. We're going to talk about water, the water in the universe, and health restoration. One of the great things that I've seen with this group is that over the years, collectively, the Kangen water family has become more and more health conscious and has become more open-minded. And as I come to these conferences, and now we have more and more physicians with different backgrounds, I have to say there's a lot of new information for me, and there's a lot of words and terms that I'm not familiar with in my allopathic training. But I try to come with an open mind and learn what I can and learn what I don't understand. So let's see if we can dive into this here. Boy, things are not working so good for me, are they? How do I advance this, guys? That's the one I'm pushing. I'm colorblind, but I know that's green anyway, so. Okay. There you go. Okay. I always want to start out with a disclaimer that this is not meant to answer any specific questions on medical conditions, and that this has not been evaluated or approved by the FDA. Oh, okay. So what I want all of you to be thinking about is, as you've listened to different speakers, and it'll be a long day, and as I said last night, your minds will be sore. What I would suggest that you do as you hear different things, and sometimes what you're hearing I think probably conflicts. What I do is look for universal truths and principles. I also want you to know that we're all on the same pathway of healing. We may have a different approach, but we're all trying to get to the same end. And some of you are going to have to unlearn some things, and some of you are going to have to relearn some things, so just be open-minded. And please don't take what I say as the truth because I'm a medical doctor. There's some very qualified alternative medicine type of doctors who are speaking. There's many of you who know much, and I think together we need to combine our brains and our resources and advance this cause. So just because I'm an MD does not necessarily qualify me as an expert. This is the result of my background and my study. And then finally, remember, we're all taking steps forward today, and we're at different locations. Some of you are further down the path of health and wellness. Some of you are just beginning. So what I want to talk about is the water universe, and we're going to talk about the building blocks of health, the disruptors of our health, and then how we restore our health. I love this quote by Cecil B. DeMille, who was the producer and director of the Ten Commandments. This is one of my mantras, is that it's impossible for us to break the law. We can only break ourselves against the law. When we practice lifestyles that are in discord with the laws of nature, there's a price to be paid. And so it's incumbent upon us to learn what those principles are and live in harmony with them. So here's 3 universal laws that I'd like to begin talking about. And I think these are some of my guiding principles as I have studied the claims about ionized water. So we have balance and harmony, we have order and sequence, and we have interdependence and synergy. Let me explain what that is, or give you some examples. In terms of balance and harmony, there's absorption and elimination. So you put food in your mouth, but you have to eliminate what your body doesn't need or want. There's reduction and oxidation. We call this ORP when we're using our meters. There's this acid-base balance. It's extremely critical, and you've heard a lot about acid and alkalinity. When we violate these particular principles of balance and harmony, one example would be toxic stress. And these would be heavy metal and organic acid accumulations that cause a lot of disease and dysfunction. Then oxidative stress can lead to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and hypertension. Another example of an imbalance or a disharmony of the laws of reduction and oxidation. And finally, the acid stress that happens when our body is not able to maintain that acid-base balance can be seen in conditions like kidney stones, kidney failure, and emphysema. The second underlying principle is the principle of order and sequence. Examples of this would be the synthesis of DNA and protein, which this is the top figure there in the right-hand corner is showing you protein synthesis. There's also order and sequence in the orbits of the solar planets and electrons around an atom. And there's also an order and sequence to every embryological development in life. And when those are violated, there are severe consequences. So if there's a misread or a disordering of the DNA sequence, it could potentially lead to cancer. One amino acid that's erroneously inserted into the hemoglobin molecule can lead to a devastating disease called sickle cell anemia. So these laws can't be violated without a consequence. If we don't digest our foods properly through the proper sequence, then we have problems with absorption. And anytime there's a significant error in this order and sequence in the embryological development of any life form, there's normally the result is a spontaneous abortion. The last example is interdependence and synergy. And there's this idea that we're all dependent on each other. And even in these smaller levels, we're made up of several different organ systems. But these organ systems communicate with each other. The circulatory system is dependent upon the endocrine system and the nervous system, to name a few. Cells have their own set of organs. We call them organelles. And those organelles are dependent upon the health and the vitality of each other. Then we have the gut, the microflora in our gut, extremely important for the proper digestion of the foods that we eat. And then we have enzymes, and cofactors are typically metals, trace minerals that are important for the function of those enzymes. But if you have an enzyme and those trace elements, without water you have an enzyme that's non-functional. It doesn't move, it doesn't do anything, so water has to be part of this. We can violate this principle of order and synergy, and the questions that I would pose is, how long can you live without a heart? How long can you live with an unhealthy heart? Can your cells survive without the mitochondria or the nucleus? Can you digest food without a healthy population of microflora? How long can you have a gut dysbiosis and expect that your health will be able to maintain itself? Okay, so with that as a backdrop, let me ask you this. Does water obey these same laws? This is a depiction of a water molecule, actually 5 water molecules, and you can see the bond angle that they associate with because of hydrogen or polar bonding. When these polar bonds are optimally aligned, you get a hexagonal type of a configuration. And remember, you're looking at a 2D image which is actually a 3D structure in life. There's an extremely well-educated chemist, Dr. Maywan Ho, who wrote a book called Living Rainbow Waters, made a very interesting statement about the cooperative, coherent nature of water, meaning this interdependence of water molecules on each other. I'm going to just read to you or tell you about this claim that she made. She talks about the hexagonal formation of water molecules in both ice and water. And the question is, why does it do that? Well, her conclusion is there's greater stabilizing energy. There's higher electron density when these molecules clump together in a 6-molecule configuration. With this enhanced energy, there's enhanced electron transfer through that structure. And this can be measured by X-ray and neutron diffraction. There are some natural sources of the pentagonal water, which is a 5-molecule complex. And these, according to her research, are found at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean in small pockets of gas. This is a kind of a technical picture. It's really a basic idea. And what we're seeing here are the fact that when you have 6 water molecules associating together, 2 things happen that are really important. One is that the hydrogen bond length becomes very short, and it doesn't tend to shorten if you put a 7th water molecule in there. It doesn't seem to make a difference. If you only have 2 or 3, you can see by the figure on the left that it makes a difference in that hydrogen bond length. The other point that's worth noting is when these water molecules combine to be a 6-molecular complex, there's great electron density, and that stabilizes at about the 6-molecule complex. So this was Dr. Maywan Ho's quote that I was alluding to earlier. She talked about this atomic synergy of water. It's a beautiful explanation of what water molecules do. She says it's incredibly dynamic, involving astronomical numbers of the most diverse players, all doing their own thing with maximum spontaneity and freedom. It's like quantum jazz. With each individual player, with a dynamic range of some 70 octaves, where each individual player is freely improvising from moment to moment, yet keeping in tune and in step with the whole. That's a pretty amazing statement about water by one of the world's experts in this field. Another contemporary that many of us can identify with is a chemist by the name of Jerry Pollack. He's at the University of Washington. This is a neat video to look on YouTube to watch, but he gave a presentation at the University of Washington as, I think, a faculty presentation of the year. We all know that water exists as a liquid, a gas, and a solid, but with his research, and this is recent, he has evidence that water also exists in a 4th stage called a liquid crystal stage. And this has some significant implications. And this book that he published, I believe it was in 2002, really illustrates and talks about that whole discovery, called Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life. And it's about this liquid crystal feature of water that can exist. And he further made a statement that cell biology in particular considers water as a mere background carrier of the more important molecules of life. However, it appears that water is a central player. So now we have someone in our own country here who's a leading researcher, spending his entire life studying water, and we're starting to scratch the surface now of the impact that water can have in our lives and in biological systems. This liquid crystal water is found along structures inside the cell. It's found along the surface of water. It allows for rapid transfer of energy. Now, this may have implications with those of you who are drinking ionized water and feel like you're energized with it. And it conducts protons 40 times faster than bulk water. Okay? Dr. Pollack has recently been introduced to ionized water. I think he's fascinated by this and wants to begin some studies in his lab on it. This is what he's talking about here. And I guess my question is, does this structure on the bottom look like it obeys the law of balance, order, and interdependence. And what you're seeing is the surface of water with these positive and negative charges, and the water molecules will line themselves up because of the polar nature of water to be attracted to the opposite charge. And you can see this alternating sequence of the way the water molecules are oriented. These little capsule-like figures represent a water molecule. And what's happening in this zone at the surface, which he calls the exclusion zone, is that all solutes, the other minerals and salts that would normally be in a solution, are moved away, and they're not found in this zone. And because it's only water molecules that are interacting with each other, it forms a very unique chemistry, which is what he terms as the liquid crystal nature of water. And so this is the physical explanation for what you're seeing with the mosquito or the water bug sitting on the surface of water and not sinking. This tension that's created, this surface tension that's recreated, is due to this liquid crystal water formation. He also goes on to explain that this same orientation happens in living biological systems. So what you're seeing here with these squiggly lines are what we're representing here as a protein, and proteins have positive and negative charges. And so the water molecules will orient themselves along these proteins based on the charge difference, and they will form an exclusion zone. And it's a very strong bond. And what's really interesting is if you take the protein out of this solution, the water molecules hold this orientation. They don't fall apart. So we can say that water has a memory. I'm not sure what the implications of that are. All I know is that's very significant, and we're not just talking about H2O here. So we know that this liquid crystal water is highly balanced, ordered, and interdependent. The molecules rely upon each other. They influence and maintain protein shape, which may be the explanation for this idea that water can create a memory. And this allows for energy transfer along these interfaces, and this may be what injects life into the enzymes that, without water, are motionless. And these same interactions are believed to also occur along other key molecules in the cell, including DNA strands and the cell membrane. So let me ask you the question here. We talked about harmony, order, and interdependence. Do you think, with what I just presented, that water obeys these laws? Have I convinced you? Good, because I convinced myself. Hopefully you agree. Does the ionized water restore this balance, order, and interdependence? Well, this is all theoretical, and I guess it's just my opinion, but I believe that it does based on a few observations. We know that we can change the ORP level by adding highly electron-rich water, and that's easy to measure. We also know that there's order in this hexagonal, order and perfect symmetry in this hexagonal molecular orientation. And interdependence, my answer to that is we know that this water has, for some reason, and I think there's theories, but for some reason it's able to hydrate and flush the tissues extremely well. Okay, Dr. Pollack made a couple other statements that I think were very interesting. He says that water at a negative electrode will cause the structure of water to grow. The water at the positive electrode will diminish that structuring effect. When water structures, it loses its structure at death. I was kind of comfortable back there, but okay. And another statement that I really liked is his definition of potential energy. His definition of potential energy is that it's a combination of order and charge separation, like you would see in a battery. So let's look at a very simple complex that many of you are familiar with, the cell membrane, and the charge difference in a cell membrane. We note on the outside of the cell membrane, as you can see, there's a positive, net positive charge. On the inside of the cell, as a result of the way these ions line up, and particularly the negatively charged proteins. We have a negative charge. So we have a charge separation, and we have an order with this. And as a result of that, we can measure this membrane, the cell membrane potential, which in most living systems is believed to be between negative 40 and negative 80 millivolts. So let me ask you this question. Does Kangen water have a charge separation potential? Do we measure that? Give me a number. What's that? Minus 300 or 400. That's what you're measuring with the ORP, right? You're measuring millivolts. Okay, so does that mean that if you drink water that's negative 600 millivolts, that you're going to do something bad to these cells that are operating at this smaller this voltage range? I would say not, because we're not talking about every particular cell simultaneously being bathed in negative 600 millivolts. It's a gradual process. And of course, these ions are moving in constant flux. But if we can add to this charge differential, I was talking to a neurologist just a few minutes ago. Maybe this has some impact in neurology and neurological disorders. Life is all about the transfer of energy. And if you just remember high school biology and what you're trying to learn about with ATP synthesis, the fuel of the cell, there's this last chain of events that has to happen before ATP is formed, because ATP is what your body primarily burns as fuel. And in this process, we're transferring energy through hydrogen ions. It's this flow of electrons. And I can't point this out to you, but let me walk over here and I'll just see if you can see this. There's an enzyme, or a protein complex. Most of these are enzymes. There's a protein right here called ubiquinone, or coenzyme Q10. This is depleted in any of you who take the cholesterol medicines, antidepressants, blood pressure medicines, particularly beta blockers, and many of the diabetic medications. So if you're depleting that CoQ10 and you're trying to make energy, how do you expect that you'd feel? Tired, weak, your muscles feel sore, your joints hurt. So what you should be doing is taking CoQ10 as a supplement to replace that. What we really need to do is appreciate the fact that sometimes medications can cause some harm. And I'll tell you with confidence that every prescription drug has a deleterious effect on cell biology, and it will cause some type of a nutritional compromise. Might be relatively minor, but it's going to be there. And so we really need to be careful with the use of prescription drugs, even though sometimes they're necessary. So how's your energy flow? How's this process happening in you right now? How are you feeling? Because to those of you who have been really faithful drinking this water, most of you will feel a surge of energy. You'll feel more energized as a result of it. Okay, most of you understand the electrolysis process. We're going back to Dr. Pollack's comment that as electrons flow from the anode to the cathode, the water will be structured. And you also know, and one of the other speakers this morning talked about being able to cause a flame to erupt as the alkaline water is coming out of the faucet. And that's because you have hydrogen gas that's combusting. And this hydrogen gas is unstable as far as I understand it, disassociates pretty quickly, and it's the release of these electrons is what the body is sucking up to help to make this negative millivolt potential that's so good for us and so powerful as an antioxidant. This is just a reminder that there are foods that are very acidic and there are foods that are alkaline. We need to try to stay on the alkaline side. I tried to have an alkaline lunch today, but I did have a roll. Okay, so I had some white bread. So I added some acidity to my diet. Probably not the best thing to do, but you know what? We're all trying to do the best we can, right? And we can always do better. But the idea is that we're progressing and improving. There are definitely acid loads. We know that the blood pH ranges is from 7.35 to 7.45. Acid is a byproduct of metabolism. The athletes talk about lactic acid, there's pyruvic acid, there's all alpha-glutaric acid, there's all types of acids that are created as a result of metabolism. Where does that acid go? Most of it is excreted in the urine. And so as the blood comes to the kidneys, the pH is 7.4. But when it filters the blood, now we have a pH that's lower because we're getting rid of those excess acids. Okay, so we know that the body has to maintain this neutrality. I had a patient once in diabetic ketoacidosis with a pH of 7.15. She was pretty much comatose, very, very sick. The body can't tolerate ranges too far on either extreme, and so goes to great extremes to maintain this balance with a buffering system. And the fact that we have 3 different systems to do this tells us that this is extremely important. These are the systems right here. I got this right out of Guyton's physiology. For me, there's got to be physiology that supports this. The lungs are the primary. It's a quick way to release a lot of acid. That's what happens when we exercise, but it doesn't fine-tune. The kidneys are the secondary means of getting rid of acid, but if we have kidney problems, as we talked about last night, would be very acidic. And then there's chemical buffers, and there's a whole array of different type of buffers both inside and outside the cell. And what we're doing when we drink alkaline water is we're affecting, to a small degree, the pH in the intra and extracellular tissues. But I don't want anybody to get the idea that drinking alkaline water is overriding these built-in systems, because they are there. They've protected us for millions of years. They've kept animal life alive through the built-in mechanisms that we have. We know about this oxidation reduction potential. We're measuring millivolts, and that negative millivolt or positive millivolt is oxidizing. I was trying to depict something, and I didn't really do a very good job with it. Most hydrogen in biological systems exists as a proton. So it's this hydrogen plus molecule that I'm depicting on the left side there. If you add an electron, now you have elemental hydrogen. That is not something that you see very long. That's pretty unstable. What you will see, though, with energy being put in, is the creation of hydrogen gas. So what we're depicting here are 2 hydrogens with 2 electrons. They're paired up, but it's fairly reactive, it's unstable, and so when it breaks apart, those electrons have to go someplace. And where they go is they go down the electron transport chain. They go to help develop this charge differential that helps us with all types of physiological functions in the body. So this extra electron is able to donate itself to other compounds and act as an antioxidant. We also have talked about the microclustered feature of water. This is measured by nuclear magnetic resonance. I'm still looking for some stronger evidence to support the 1 or 2 studies that I found from scientific data about this microclustering effect. But it has been measured. And this is one of the studies that I found, and when they compared the nuclear magnetic resonance measured in hertz, you can see there's quite a difference between the standard types of water that people drink and this hexagonal ionized water. So something unique about the energy, and we believe it's these properties that allow it to be clustered together and allow those electrons to have a tighter interaction with one another. Another recent scientist who shared a Nobel Prize, I believe it was in 2003, from the United Kingdom, Dr. Agri, came up with this concept that described aquaporins, which somebody had mentioned previously. Aquaporins are protein channels that allow the transfer of water to go through. This would make sense that as we age and our proteins are compromised and oxidized, there's many examples of what happens when these proteins change their structure, from enzymes that are not as efficient as they should be to insulin receptors perhaps not working optimally, and maybe even this water channel, this aquaporin, if these proteins become oxidized and change the configuration of the proteins, now we have a structural change in this channel that may impede the flow of water. And this is just theoretic conjecture, so we're off the science talk here, but if you're drinking alkaline and ionized water with a lot of free electrons, you have the ability to potentially heal and restore the health of those proteins back to their native structure, potentially allowing the flow of the water to improve. So our health is compromised, and I came up with this tricky catchphrase. Shan Stratton is a genius at this. I kind of worked at this, and I wasn't very good, but this is what I came up with, 5 things. And this is what I think we've done to compromise our health. The wrong type of water. We need to be careful about what we put on our skin, what we put in our mind, what we put in our mouth, and what we put in our lungs. Now let me give you a couple examples of this. I want you to think about what's in your water. Now this is depicting the sort of the life cycle of mercury, which is a heavy metal, and many of us are contaminated with mercury. My mercury levels are at toxic levels. I just learned this about a month ago. And this gets aerosolized in the air, particularly in areas where there's a lot of steel mills and a lot of industry. And then it filters down into the vegetation and into the water supply, gets into the plants, gets into the fish. If we're growing produce in these regions, it gets into the foods that we eat. So let me show you the map of mercury levels in different regions of the United States. You can see the Northeast has got the highest mercury levels, and this is where a lot of the original steel mills were. And there are other reasons for this as well, but I just want you to see that you're all exposed to mercury at some degree or another. And when this gets in your system, it has to be considered, because I'm not convinced that drinking alkaline water gets rid of mercury. I'm not sure how that happens. Maybe somebody else can explain it. Another interesting comment, looking at pesticide mixtures and talking about how they disrupt the endocrine system and the effects on amphibians. Dr. Hayes said there's toxic levels of these pesticides that were studied in frogs at levels of 0.1 part per billion. 1 part per billion is the equivalent of 1 drop of water in an Olympic-sized pool. Okay, so we're talking very, very small levels that can be very toxic to amphibians. This should blow your mind a little bit. The urine of a farm worker contains an average of 2,400 parts per billion of these pesticides and these compounds, and he says that this could effectively castrate 720,000 frogs from the diluted urine of these workers, okay? So think of that. And this is the consequence when these animals are exposed to these types of pesticides and endocrine disruptors. All kinds of strange things happen. Another study was reporting. Was there a comment? Oh, you couldn't see that? Okay, that's a frog with two additional legs growing out in the middle. So major malformation. Another study was talking about this, the biomonitoring of industrial pollutants. And the statement was that humans are now exposed to synthetic pollutants in drinking water, air, and the food supply, as well as in consumer products and home pesticides. Some of these chemicals resist metabolism and excretion and therefore accumulate in body tissues. And the general population, their burden indicates that even small exposures and releases of these persistent bioaccumulative substances can develop in significant levels over time. Now, we're not talking about biotoxicity here, but we are talking about what goes into our body and what we're exposed to, whether it's through our skin, our lungs, or our mouth. And we're talking about compromised water, because that was my first point here. There's a lot of compromised water that is available to us. Most of the bottled water we drink has oxidation properties, but it's very easy to eliminate that by drinking high-quality ionized water. There's some compromise in skin applications. This report it was a survey, 2,300 people interviewed around the country, and the findings was that 1 out of every 5 adults is potentially exposed every day to the top 7 common carcinogenic impurities that are found in cosmetics and personal care products. 1 out of 5 of you. Hydroquinone was the most on the top of this list, and then there are others listed here. Parabens are a a toxicant, we call this, a man-made toxin that's found in cosmetic products, skincare products. And they did a study looking at women, and they noticed when they measured these that they had high concentrations of these parabens in the upper outer portion of a woman's breast tissue. And so the conclusion was this was not something that was being consumed orally because that would have an even distribution. Rather, this was a topical release of these parabens, and the concern is that most of you know that most breast cancers are found in this same region. They looked at 7 out of 40 of these women who had these paraben residues were reported as never having used underarm cosmetics, suggesting that there are other sources that got into their system. And some of these could be things like lotions and sunscreens and moisturizers. So we need to be very careful. We're thinking about what we're putting in our mouth now with water. We need to be thinking about what we're putting on our skin as well. We also have, this is the tea in water, compromised thoughts. And I think probably the biggest failure of healthcare is most of the allopathic approach is that we're trying to heal externally rather than internally. We're trying to manage things with medications, and I think we all know that's the wrong approach. Now, obviously, we're all pretty familiar with the foods that cause us compromise with our health. I don't think I need to really belabor that point any. But let me tell you a little bit more about these environmental toxins that we are taking in unknowingly. Each year, there are 2,000 new chemicals that are registered for everyday use as household products, personal care products, and household cleaners. 2,000 new chemicals. Since World War II, we've had over 85,000 synthetic chemicals that have been registered by the EPA. And roughly 3,000 synthetic chemicals are added every year at levels that we consider high production volume. And that means the definition of that is over 1 million pounds of each of these chemicals are produced and imported into the U.S. That's a lot of chemicals that we really don't have any clue what's happening to when our body comes in contact with it. A little bit more on pesticides. Over 1 billion pounds of pesticides are used annually in the United States, mostly in the commercial agriculture business. The EPA has approved the use of over 350 different pesticide ingredients to be used in the foods we eat. What do you think about that? They say it's okay for us. There's a whole political tangent we could go on there. But only 1%, a tenth of a percent of the pesticides actually reach the intended pest. The rest of that gets washed off and contaminates vegetation and water sources. Laboratory tests have uncovered 167 chemical pollutants in the blood and urine from 9 volunteers, including an average of 53 carcinogens in these individuals. And these were people that were not particularly exposed to chemicals at any known level or live near any industrial facility. So these are people that think they're relatively free from the harm of these chemicals. Now, let me tell you a little bit about atrazine, and some of you who do bioidentical hormone therapy, I think, can identify this. I do use bioidentical hormones in my practice, and the last 2 years I've seen about half a dozen men come in, mid-30s, big, strong, muscular guys. They look like they've been on steroids, but they're not, just very, very testosterone-driven, and they have just crashed. No energy, no libido. They feel depressed, they're tired, they feel awful. If you measure their testosterone levels, they're low. If you replace them, they feel better. But my question is, what happened to these testosterone levels? Why did this happen? Of course, women have the same exposures, but this is pretty dramatic when you see a man who loves the gym now become a couch potato with no explained reason. Atrazine is one of the most widely used herbicides since 1959. It's a weed killer of choice for corn, citrus fruits, and sugar canes. It was banned in Europe in 2003. And in the United States, though, we produce 70 to 80 million pounds annually. It's a major contaminant of groundwater in the Midwest. Now, why did I mention hormones? Because this will knock down a man's testosterone level, as will Roundup, and some of the other weed killers that we're commonly exposed to. We don't realize that we're being exposed to it. It can travel up to 600 miles from the point of application and has persisted in groundwater in France despite no application there for over 18 years, 15 years. And it's estimated that all Americans are exposed to this every day, or at least 60% are exposed to this every day. I think you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with water? Well, it does have something to do with water. This is the map of the astrazine herbicide and where the levels are found. You can see it's in the Corn Belt in the Midwest. I think we need to be very careful about the foods we consume, because there will be effects that will linger in our bodies for a long time unless we identify them. And one of my contentions is that ionized water may not have the direct effect on releasing these, but certainly would be something that I would add to my armamentarium. So health restored, that's how we destroy our health. The things we eat, the water we drink, the things we put in our minds, in our lungs, and on our skin. Now, how do we restore it? Now, this is a formula that most of you have heard of. First, we need to eliminate, and this is the primary route of getting rid of these toxins, getting rid of those things the body doesn't want. So we have two organs that we need to think about, our intestinal tract and our liver. Our liver detoxifies anything that's harmful to us, and it goes through a series of reactions to do it, but basically phase 1 reactions are all about making that compound more water soluble. So if you're trying to make something water soluble, wouldn't it make sense that you would want something that's electron rich, that's ionized, that's structured? I mean, I don't know that there hasn't been a study on this, but to me that makes perfect sense. These phase 1 enzymes also are dependent upon B vitamins and trace minerals that many of us are deficient in or insufficient in. And many of you need to consider selenium supplementation and perhaps magnesium. Phase 2 enzymes, then the second step of this process is once we've made those bad things water soluble, now we bind them in a way that we can excrete them through our gut without them being reabsorbed. So it'll go out in our feces. So this is the conjugation process. Foods that have a lot of sulfur in them stink, but they're very good because they're used in this conjugation process. And the best foods with the best sources of sulfur are the cabbage family, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage. These are excellent foods to help with the detoxification of the liver. And then, of course, with the gut health, it's a matter of, Shan talks about nutrient utilization and helping us utilize those nutrients with the aid of enzymes to help us digest the foods, because many of our enzymes don't function optimally because with age, proteins become oxidized and they change their structure. And then the other part of this is that we have to be able to eliminate effectively. But many of us don't do that. There's a lot of reasons why we have problems with our gut health. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but the gut and the brain are intimately connected. And the gut has more neurons located that line it second only to the brain. So there's a connection and a communication between the gut and the brain. Many times, gut dysbiosis can cure or heal significantly someone with any mental disorder, whether it's anxiety, depression, or other types of disorders. There's also the gut immune connection. 60% of our immune system is lined in our intestinal tract. If your intestinal tract is bogged down with these toxic residues and pesticides and impartially digested foods, for all the reasons that we've talked about, there will be a price to be paid. We have over 100 trillion microorganisms in the gut, 50 different types of microorganisms that aid in digestion. They help synthesize vitamins, and they maintain a healthy epithelial tissue. But what happens when we take antibiotics without really eating them? We use these acid blockers and antacids. We change the pH through the intestinal tract, and now we really disrupt some of these microorganisms that are really responsible for our ability to utilize and absorb the nutrients that we're trying to get. We also have compromises in what we breathe, and these are all pretty obvious. For many of you who've listened to Dr. Allen, some really interesting work that she's done with pilots who have been exposed to the exhaust from jet fuels. These are direct neurotoxins and can be detoxified with the right protocols. A lot of these are new to me. This is not something I learned in medical school, but it's something I'm hearing about now. So we can restore health with, first, structured, energy-rich, ionized alkaline Kangen water. Simplest thing we could do, that's what we're all doing. We're seeing a lot of positive things happening anecdotally. And you can't argue with some of the miracles that are happening. And I sort of fought that for a long time until my wife had adhesive capsulitis, a frozen shoulder for a year and a half with no resolution until the day she drank 1.5 gallons of freshly made ionized water. And that evening, she had a restoration of that movement of that joint. I have no idea how that happened. And I felt like I was an expert. I'd gone through that. I've gone through the therapy. I know what that feels like to have those tissues ripped. I actually heard mine rip in my armpit the day that I got my motion back in my shoulder. So I know that it had to be the water. We have to be careful about what we put on our skin. Next time you put lotion on your skin, ask yourself, would you be willing to eat it on a tablespoon? Because that's basically what's happening. It's getting in your system. We need to watch our thoughts. We have very toxic thoughts, and I think the remedy for toxic thoughts is service, which is what's so nice about all of you, because you're all service-minded. You're really here to help other people, and great things happen when you're thinking of others more than yourself. Then we need to eat live food, foods that are rich in enzymes, the foods that God has created for us. And anytime we process or modify those foods, we compromise the nutritional value of them to some degree. So plant-based, organic, variety, and colorful foods are the best foods that we could eat. Obviously, we need to drink or to breathe air as clean as we possibly can. And then finally, move. Now, that doesn't fit my acronym WATER, so I didn't know what to do with that, but you got to move. I mean, movement, it helps you perspire, helps you get rid of some of these toxicants, but it also moves your lymphatics. Extremely healthy, extremely important. So we're the product of our environment. And an interesting statement that I like that Louis Pasteur made on his deathbed was, he said, the cell is nothing, the environment is everything. Think of the environment that you're saturating your tissues with. And we know that there are positive things that happen when we saturate our tissue with energy-rich, structured, ionized alkaline water. But the point I'm making here is that there may be a little bit more that needs to happen, because some of you drink this water hoping for a magical cure, and maybe you're not feeling it. And for those of you who are having other symptoms, my suggestion is that we get to the root cause, we keep digging, and we look for these toxins that we've been exposed to and find ways to get those eliminated. So questions that I get, these are some of the questions I've had over the last couple years, and I think we all have the right answer here. It doesn't cure any of these conditions. It helps to support healthy biochemistry. It helps to support a body that's intended and designed to miraculously heal itself, even in the face of tremendous abuse that we submit ourselves to. Our body will heal itself until we take our last breath. Now, I didn't talk about studies, but there are studies that exist, and for the skeptics, they need to see these, and I will admit they're not maybe as robust and not as numerous as we would like. But I've settled in my mind that I'm comfortable with that, because they continue to come in, and I feel good about the fact that this is in line with basic principles, those principles I talked about with harmony, order, and interdependence. It's consistent with what I know about physiology and biochemistry, and what I've seen in the literature, it's consistent with that. And what I'm hearing from other individuals that are studying it, it's consistent with that. I firmly believe that we are scratching the surface, and we're in for some exciting times. And you guys are all positioned perfectly, because you're able to take this message to those who are willing and open enough to hear it. So we're back to this statement again. It's impossible for us to break the law, but we can break ourselves against it. Let's continue to help others heal from the ailments that afflict them. Let's promote healthy lifestyles, and at the core of that healthy lifestyle should be ionized water. So a healing formula, these are the lifestyles that I suggest that we embrace. These are the lifestyles that I suggest that we avoid. And I think most of you would agree with this. This is nothing unique. Some people ask about supplements. Remember what the word means. It means to supplement a healthy diet. our nutrition should come from food. It should come from raw plant-based foods primarily. But if we're going to take supplements, these are the supplements that I rank in sort of the most importance down to maybe the more optional supplements. And again, it supplements a healthy lifestyle. It doesn't substitute for a healthy diet. Now, as I conclude, we're all about helping other people heal. Now, if we apply those natural laws of harmony, when you're approaching others, let's find common ground, and let's find those things that attract us to each other, and let's talk about those things. Let's don't get into arguments with people and try to convince them and persuade them and overwhelm them with too many anecdotal stories or maybe science that we don't understand. Let's simply humbly and lovingly share our message with those that we care about. Let's also remember that there's an order and a sequence to this, that first we need to listen. Because if we're not listening and understanding what they're saying, we're not really communicating. Then we need to teach them, then we need to show them, and then we need to listen to them and see what they've processed and how we can refine the message. And then there's this interdependence. And this is when this whole business becomes a lot of fun. When you're building teams together and we're having events like this and we're all collectively leaving better than when we came. Okay, so here's a question for you. I started with harmony, order, and interdependence. And this is my family. Now, how often do you think I have harmony, order, and this synergy in my family? I've got teenagers. Katie, where's Katie? Where is she? Stand up, Katie. Katie is the one on the bottom right here. She is a fun kid. I am so proud of her and so glad she could come, and many of you have just embraced her and made her feel welcome. She made a DVD about the ionized water, a music video that I was trying to show you, but couldn't make it work. But the point here is that this is where life becomes very sweet. When we have harmony with those that we love, when there is order and there is this interdependence, this feeling of love, that's a feeling that nothing else in life can compare with. And I think that's what we're all about as a Kangen water family, is having those experiences. I love this quote by Emerson. This boy, Dustin Carter, was a state wrestling champion, not a champion, but he made it to the state finals in Ohio a few years ago. At the age of 5, he developed meningitis, became septic, and had his limbs amputated. And he's still competing at the state meet. This is a phenomenal message that there's so much more within us than what we give ourselves credit for. He stood by the crossroads all alone, the sunlight in his face. He had no thought for the world unknown. He was set for the manly race. But the road stretched east, and the road stretched west, and the lad knew not which road was best. So he turned from the road which led him down, and he lost the race and the victor's crown, because no one stood at the crossroads there to show him the better way. Another day, on this self-same place, a boy with high hopes stood. He too was seeking the manly race. He too was seeking for things that were good. But one was there whom the roads did know, and that one did show him which way to go. Today he walks the highways fair, because one stood at the crossroads there. You are all standing at the crossroads of someone's literal life, their health, their future. May you have the courage to continue to share this message with confidence. May you open your mouths. May you love those that you're serving. And may you have joy in this opportunity with ionized water. Thank you.
Everybody, come on, stretch it out, come on. Dr. Mcknight, you're awesome. We appreciate you. We're so blessed to have you on our team, aren't we? Are we blessed or what? I can't hear you. Step over here. Would you do me a favor? I have a couple of books, Confessions of a Skeptical Physician. Would you do me a favor real quick and sign a few of these? Because we're going to raffle these off. A few of his books. Confessions of a Skeptical Physician. I'm telling you folks, this book right here has made more people that were skeptical unskeptical. And it's a phenomenal, phenomenal book. I'll tell you, I've sold more machines from this book than you would ever know. It's phenomenal. We're going to raffle a few of these off. Dr. Mcknight is going to sign a couple here. We're going to raffle those off. If you want them in bulk, you can get them at 6A Tools right outside. And for those online, we just want to say hello again to you. We're hearing from you from East Coast, West Coast, and from Asia, all around the world. And we just want to acknowledge you and welcome you all from watching us all around the world on the 6A Tools internet site. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mike. Another round of applause for Dr. Timothy Mcknight. Okay.